welcome to Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and I'm with my very good buddy, Mark. This is the podcast where we find albums for one another, and we have to give our honest opinion and review. And these albums may make us go out of our comfort zone, but that's all right, Mark?
Yeah, Frank makes a great point there. For many of us, it can be easy to get stuck in a genre or a style for one reason or another, and finding new records can be difficult. And then we don't know what to expect as we do explore new things. Right.
That's totally. And speaking of things and the whole searching, you can find us on Instagram at Check Out This Record. All one word. Drop us a suggestion for an album, and we just may review it on this episode. I have a funny story for you, Mark. You know, I was driving in the car the other day with my daughters, right? Mm-hmm. And we're listening to whatever crap pop song they requested, and I was just miserable. And I sat there for a second. I said, my God, I turned into my dad with regards to his reactions when I used to play my music that I like. And I've crossed this whole dimension into like dad rock, and it's kind of weird. I may like it.
Dad rock, is this that when you only listen to bands that are named after places, your Chicago's, your Boston, America? Tell me more about this subgenre that has managed to slip my ears.
Well, I think from what I hear, the definition is easy listening, and those bands do fit the bill. But on a side note, don't mess with America, man. They got some classics.
Wow. It's like a whole new world of sound has been opened up to me like never before. Not. You know, while I'm thinking about it, we're at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And why don't we share with our listeners some of our favorite albums of 2019? And you want to give them a start there, Frank?
Sure, absolutely. Now, for the record, America didn't release any albums in 2019, so they're not going to be on there. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mark.
I know our swath of America fan listeners are really going to be heartbroken.
They are, absolutely. And I'm going to sing a song of theirs at one point on one of these episodes because they got some good tracks. So, okay, in no particular order, here's the top 5 releases on my side in 2019. I would say the Get Up Kids Problems, the Menzingers, Hello Exile. I know we talked about that album offline before. Oso Oso, Basking in the Glow. Singer Joe Pug, The Flood and the Color. And again, these are no particular order. And then Strung Out, Songs of Armor and Devotion. So those are my 5. What about yours, Mark?
Well, as we said, Frank, in no order, but for me, exactly this order. At number 5, The Coat Hangers, The Devil You Know. The only metal choice you'll find in my top 5 today is Sun O, Life Metal. Pup, Morbid Stuff, really fun record. I know this is one when we were talking about this that you also mentioned was pretty close to your top of your list. I also have the Menzingers, Hello Exile, at number 2. And then my favorite of this year was Off With Their Heads, Be Good. Really enjoyed that record. Honorable mentions to the Black Keys with Let's Rock and Lagwagon's Railer. And for those not familiar with the fact that Bad Religion put out another album this year, it sucked.
Like the ones before it, right?
Yeah. I'm counting 5 before it that have sucked. I really wish they would stop. They're coming around for their 40th anniversary next year, and I got to tell you, Frank, I just don't want to see them if they keep putting out bad records. I love the band. I love the ethos and what they stand for in those early records.
Right.
I don't think Recipe for Hate is my personal favorite. I don't think you can put out albums of that quality and then come back to the last few records and stand by it and call it the same band. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'm an against the grain type of guy. Anesthesia in particular is one of probably my favorite Bad Religion song. But I agree with you on that. And maybe what I would like to see is, hey, stop making the records and like I want to take like one of those really classic records like Recipe for Hate. And I know they've done expanded editions before, but like give me more from that. Like I'll even listen to the demos of those at this point, to be honest with you. They're just that good, you know?
Yeah, I think I'm at the point where just put out a 40th anniversary T-shirt. I'll buy it. Stop making records.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about any of you guys retiring poorly based on merch sales alone. So stop putting out bad records.
They've done well. They're okay.
Yeah, I feel like they're okay. So this idea that like we need to pump out a new album every few months is kind of a bullshit cliche. I shouldn't say every few months. It's been a couple of years.
Right.
I was really happy that the album wasn't just an excuse to beat on Trump.
Yeah.
Not that they couldn't have done it well, but that they didn't need to. And they Well, I mean, maybe they did need to because this record was garbage. And maybe some more blatant Trump bashing would have gone over well. But
well, the thing with them, and on a side note, and I don't want to get too off topic, but they've always been more like the thinking person's, band. So I think to them it would even dumb it down just to be like, okay, we're gonna, bash on this person. To be honest with you, but yeah. To your point, it's like, if you don't have something good to put out, maybe next time wait a little longer to put out that good album. I think that's it in a nutshell, sure. Right?
Yeah, or hey, you know what? Throw me a 4-track EP with really interesting stuff on it instead of tracks of yeah.
Right.
Or like I said, I'll buy a 40th anniversary T-shirt if you promise to stop making bad records.
Maybe they give a contest for who can design that, right?
Sure. Hey, look, I'd love to get that Two Nuns Kissing shirt I used to have.
Yeah, I remember that shirt.
The artist Coop has done some great work for them over the years. Let's put out some of those T-shirts. I don't mind wearing a vulgar T-shirt. I like that it says Bad Religion. I'm not afraid of a crossbuster in front of my conservative in-laws.
There you go.
I just don't need another bad record. There's plenty of bad records out there.
Or me.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
just kidding, my friend. Just kidding. All right. So now, before we get into the album reviews, it's so crazy how you discover music nowadays, right? And how it's involved. I know back in the day, I mean, me and you would sit there for hours burning CDs for each other and still limited based on our own individual collections. Now, for me, it's really a combination of Spotify or streaming, and then, of course, finding obviously a good record store if you want to buy the physical copy, but it's really just taking a good record and finding maybe similar bands and just keep going down the hole, so to speak. What say you, Mark, on that?
Yeah, the rabbit holes I've gone down in the name of finding a great album. I've definitely been the guy at the record store the clerk is just yelling at for picking up every record and taking pictures of it. I know they usually think I'm looking for it on eBay. I'm just trying to find new stuff, dude. Give me a break, okay? Yeah. My other favorite method is, hey, this is a band I like and they're on tour. Well, who are they on tour with?
Yeah.
That way, because, perhaps it's a regional band that can only do the West Coast with them. And Frank and I are Florida locked here in Florida. And a lot of bands just don't come here. So we'll get some East Coast bands. We'll get some middle of the country bands, but we miss a lot of West Coast bands, or we miss bands from different places. So that to me is one of my favorite ways of just going, hey, look, if they're good enough to be booked on the same show together, maybe this is a band I should be checking out and tumbling down that rabbit hole, see who they're playing shows with when they're at home, see what records they've put out and who their friends are and what their friends are doing. It's always a fun way to find another record.
Yeah, totally. And then that's almost exciting in itself. And you could really come across some good gems. I know we all have in our time of just going to shows and really seeing who's on tour with each other. So yeah, I love it. It's addicting, but it's what we do, right?
Definitely.
All right. So are you ready to do this thing? You ready to do the reviews?
Absolutely.
All right. So kick it off for us, my friend.
Sure. Last week I found a record both of us probably should have known by now. But the best part of this weird world of listening to music is that there's going to be bands and albums and just kind of boats we missed. And this boat in particular was 1991's Mush by Leatherface. Here in the U.S., we'd get the album in 92 when the dudes from Seed Records, an offshoot of Atlantic Records, thought that they could score a quick hit by releasing Mush in the successful wake of Nirvana. Mush for me is Leatherface seminal work, easily making its way up my personal list of best albums ever.
Wow. Yeah, it's what's great about doing this is I probably wouldn't have given them the time of day unless tasked with it, to be honest with you. I recall them on being on comps before. I can't actually recall them on being on comps before, but I recall them being on that split with Hot Water Music, and it wasn't really on my radar, but now they are. So what's cool is Leatherface, I mean, they date back to 1988, hailing from the UK, fronted by Frankie Stubbs, who you talked about last week. Some have described the music really as a cross between Husker Du and Motorhead, which is interesting in itself. They had a brief split in 93, they reunited in the late 90s, and that's when that BYO split series came out with Hot Water Music. I'm sure we've had to have talked about that, right, Mark, at some point, or have come across that in stores? I mean, now I recall seeing it. What about you?
Well, Definitely the BYO split series, right? I think it's most famous for the Rancid and NoFX split,
Yeah.
which I think both you and I agreed, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. NoFX actually showed up and did some work on that record.
Yeah, they showed them up. Yeah.
Where it really felt like Rancid just kind of phoned it in.
Yep.
I think Frank and I will tell you, I think we're probably both big Rancid fans than we are of NoFX, especially personally. The later NoFX has just gone right back downhill.
Yeah.
Whereas Rancid's work, while more limited, has really those last few records have sucked too. But I think overall they're a better band. But in terms of the BYO split series, and seeing it places, you've got things like Bouncing Souls and Anti-Flag together, the NoFX and Rancid we just mentioned, and this really was the first one. It started the whole shebang to begin with. BYO notably has pulled these all off of streaming. So if you want to play along at home and know what the hell we're talking about, go to YouTube. Most all of the albums are there in their entirety, or you can kind of piece them together with track listings that you can find online. It's a great series. I don't think anybody really did a bad job on it at all. The only one that really I had a hard time with was the One Man Army stuff, and that's just because I'm not that familiar with One Man Army. I believe they're on there with Alkaline
Trio. Yep. Yeah, totally. I mean, it was an interesting concept that they had, right? And I think the other one was Swing Gutters and Youth Brigade. I love the Swing Gutters songs on that. So again, good concept, and that's where we would have first heard about Leatherface. So when I researched them on the old Google machine, I noticed how Mush, as you stated, it was released in 1991, the offshoot of Atlantic Records. And I'm listening to it, and I can't believe that it was actually made in 91. To me, it almost seems timeless. It doesn't sound dated. And actually a little bit before its time. Now, first listen, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say the minute I listened to it, I said, nope. I said, Mark doesn't get me nowadays. I said, he's just throwing these punk rock records at me. And that's not what I'm wanting all the time. But you know what? I was wrong. Okay. And I'm going to admit that. So we start off with I Want the Moon. It kicks off the album. It's very mature, caught my attention. I think Stubbs was around 29, 30 when this came out. So you can definitely tell it's grown up big boy punk rock to me. And if I wanted to be in this style of band, I would really model it after this. Now, How Lonely is the next song. And I tell you what, this is exactly why I fell in love with punk rock. And you know why that is, Mark?
Tell me.
So it's fast, it's hard hitting, and it's gritty. And believe it or not, I think it has a lot to do with your instrument, which is the drums. I think that's what makes it punk. You don't get that style of drumming in any other type of music, in my opinion. It's signature. It doesn't have a lot of air. That open space is filled up really quick, and really you have to pay attention to it. Playing a song to me, like How Lonely in front of people, would be very, very fulfilling. As a drummer, Mark, you got to kind of be with me on this take a little bit, right?
Oh, 100%. I absolutely love the rhythm section in general on this entire record. Very tight. There's very little. You use the word air. There's just these perfect little pockets of the bass and drums working together that really fill out this sound. What did you think of his voice? What did you think of the gravel?
So that's right away where I said to myself, man, I was like, Mark doesn't get me. I was like, he doesn't understand me, this and that. But it was How Lonely at the end when they kept repeating, how lonely, how lonely. Sorry for the singing, folks. But I said, I'm hearing a bunch of stuff. I'm hearing a bunch of stuff going on here. It's not just this fast-paced music or gritty type music where he's just screaming all over it. There's a bunch of really, really, I think, cool stuff going on, and it grew on me. I don't want to be the one to say it. That's the next one. I liked it. It was a change of pace. The band could have totally just went for another like super fast song, but then they give us this track and it has great guitar work. The placement I noticed of the palm muting too was done nice, and it sounds mature. So now I'm saying this is the second time, and I want to throw that now to you, Mark. Do you get the feeling here with this being a more mature version of punk when you listen to this record?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. I think, you and I had talked in the past, for those of you who weren't eavesdropping on our conversations, Frank and I are both really big Descendants fans. And the really cool thing with Descendants records, if you listen to them in order, you hear the band grow up. which is cool because for a lot of us, we heard them very early and very young, and we heard Frank, I'm going to lose his last name right now, who wrote a lot of the songs and played guitar on the early Descendants albums.
Mm-hmm.
You really heard a lot of his angst and his anger in songs like Parents. And as the band grew, and obviously he wasn't in the band at the end, but as they grew and they developed, and Bill and Milo got into writing songs and they grew, and you felt that happen. Now we're in this Leatherface world with these guys. It's their third record. They know what they're doing. They're proficient with their instruments. And this album, if you listen to it right, will just break your heart with its maturity and its earnest.
I totally agree. And the name of the gentleman was Frank Navetta, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, very aggressive guitar playing style. And you're right, really, really set the tone there. And so we see it on Pandora's Box, too. It's another prime example how they use all these things we talked about, especially the melody here. And the guitars are layering, and there's a signature sound with it. So you have guitars. One guitar is not doing the same as the other, which, again, it could easily happen in punk. And there's a signature grit over it. That could be the recipe here. I like during the solo, again, the two guitars are not just one's playing the chords and the other's doing the lead. The rhythm guitar is really doing some interesting things here. And again, this album is not afraid to slow down for a moment and to ensure that the songs, to ensure that they're still impactful. And I think that's key. I've seen some bands really have these moments, and just because they have this recipe, so they just fill it up with fast songs, and their slow songs aren't really that great. Not the case here. Springtime's another track. It reminds me of Hot Water Music, and I could definitely tell where Hot Water Music got their foundation from as far as Leatherface goes. I know we spoke about that split, but did you get some Hot Water Music vibes here too, Mark?
Oh, definitely. You definitely feel like Chris Wallard and Chuck Reagan had their ears pressed against their jukeboxes at home. The CD in, they were up against it, and they were doing everything they could learn to play along. I think, and obviously I don't know anyone from Hot Water Music personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Hot Water Music today would be the band they are without Leatherface.
Yeah. Definitely direct correlation there and influence. And again, I mentioned the both guitars. That's something Hot Water Music does too. They both try to be distinctive. Looks like maybe even some of this stuff, and again, I'm just speculating here, in Leatherface, maybe it was done just impromptu and it fits so well that they kind of just stuck with it. As a guitar player, I always liked minor chords. I like the way they sound, and they've done a lot of that too with the minor chords, especially on the choruses. I picked up the guitar on some of these tracks, and just to see kind of the positioning of it, and I really liked what was being done. The drumming seems to be well done too. The song "In the Real World" comes to mind. Mark is former drummer. Do you agree with that? Because that to me is a great track.
I think the only time you're going to get me to laugh at this record and kind of shake my head is Baked Potato, which I'm sure we're going to get to in a minute. But I agree with you. Like I said, up and down this whole album, whether it's rhythm guitar, bass guitar, drums, and the few leads that we do get, musically, instrumentally, this record hits all of the right notes for me. I mean, it just starts and cranks right through.
Yeah. And when I was listening to the version with the bonus tracks, I first said to myself, wow, 15 tracks, that's a lot for my attention span nowadays. However, that's the expanded version. So the actual album has 12 tracks, and I could handle that. That's a perfect amount to digest. Now, the album ends with Dead Industrial Atmosphere, and what an ending, right? The beginning riff is just amazing. I love how the verse drumming gets fast, then it slows down. To me, that's musical impact. It's something that stands out, and again, it's like, hey, pay attention because this is important. The opening riff, it comes back, and I'm glad it does during the chorus. It's open, it's melodic, and it builds nicely to the more aggressive parts in the song. It's just a beautiful song overall. The 3 bonus tracks, I think, were a nice little treat too, or should we say bonus cup, right, Mark? We say sure. Bonus cup here?
Absolutely.
Mug, right? It ends with the Police cover of Message in a Bottle. I like this version. The Police, they actually had some unique and intricate guitar work, and Leatherface definitely holds their own here. Okay, so what I liked, here we go. I like the Husker Du Motorhead cross. I think that's really accurate, and that mesh works. The whole before its time and timeless feel of the album, I at no point really thought that this was 1991. And some albums from that time, they'll sound dated. They really will. And to me, I didn't get that at all. It's mature. Again, this is big boy punk rock, or even rock, whatever, however you want to say it. I love how they could slow it down and still have the songs be aggressive. The guitar work is great. They're feeding off of each other. Some odd timing too makes an appearance, and it's welcomed. It's not just standard 4/4 timing. Favorite tracks: How Lonely. I mean, I have a list on, or I have a playlist on Spotify of favorite tracks, and that one is definitely on there. I don't want to be the one to say it. In the real world, and Dead Industrial Atmosphere. Some things I didn't like. Okay, Mark. So Baked Potato, and not a day goes by, but Baked Potato in particular, they didn't do anything for me. Now, I have this weird thing with naming songs after foods, or mentioning foods in songs. I don't know. It's probably an issue. We could talk about that issue on another episode, even though I know the song's not about baked potato. But that didn't do anything for me. And I think you share the same sentiment, right?
Well, yeah, I definitely think, I was wondering if this is a British version of the UK situation.
Yeah.
Or, excuse me, a British version of The Office.
Right.
Listening to the song, really looking through the lyrics, it's got to do with political issues of the UK of the time.
Sure.
Do you and I get that here in 2019? We're talking about a record that's almost 30 years old.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think it maybe it didn't last quite as well as the others, but I think, I think for it to be the one downside, or the softest part, isn't so bad. I was curious.
Yeah.
Last week we talked about your 18-year-old brain versus your nearly 40 brain, right?
And
how you take records. I feel like, I got Frank today a lot closer than maybe I did when you were 18. Do you think this record, if somebody had put this in front of you when you were 18, would this have carried the weight that it does now?
It's funny because once our band days ended, I would say that my tastes shifted, and the more aggressive punk is what I was listening to on a daily basis. I think that reason for the shift was because then, you recall, I just started lugging around the acoustic guitar and playing open mics. So I had to kind of get some inspiration there and listen then to music that more fit that bill. So I forgot when punk rock is done right, and there's a lot of bands I don't like too in the genre too, so I don't think that helps, but I forget when it's done right. It's some of the best music in the world. And again, I think with that maturity, the grit, the emotion, and the melody, it's hitting at a right time, because I think that's probably when you noticed too that I was getting more into singer-songwriter stuff, right? Was after the band days ended.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was kind of just thinking about, it's interesting because I think for me, this would have, if you put this right next to A Flight and a Crash, the two of them would have been on loop in my CD player, as Flight and a Crash already was. But now when I get it, I feel like it just resonates a little deeper than maybe albums did back then.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, you were so specific about thinking about those two kinds of things. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted you to check out this record, is I was hoping that maturity would really appeal to you.
Yeah, I absolutely did. It did strike me more as the 39-year-old kind of listening to this. I think it was dirty. It's beautiful at the same time, mature and timeless, as I talked about. If I'm in a record store, I'm busting the old piggy bank to buy the record. Now, I was bummed to find out that the guitarist Dickie Hammond, he passed away in 2015. Mm-hmm. I was bummed on that for sure. However, I was pleased to find some acoustic tracks by Frankie Stubbs, including Dead Industrial Atmosphere. So if you go ahead and go on Spotify, for example, then you could find that track there, and it's pretty awesome. And he's got several YouTube videos of just him playing acoustic, and I love it. I know I'm personally going to be playing How Lonely on the acoustic, and maybe I'll even record a version. Who knows? And this is the time when I wish my voice was more like someone like Stubbs too, because I felt it's perfect. So I'm at a record store. I'm buying this record hands down. Great suggestion, my friend.
Thanks, man. I'm really happy you like this record.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. All right. So now it's my turn for what I had for you, right?
Yep.
All right. So this, I don't know if I want to say it's one of my curveballs, but it's one that I was like, okay, I'm curious as to what is Mark's opinions on this. Cloud Nothings, as we said last week, they're from Cleveland. They're one of the more newer bands that I personally really dig. I sometimes can't make out where their specific influences come from. I like how they don't make me think that they're just a carbon copy of another band, which is in my opinion, what I like. So I can't necessarily pick out a direct influence. I like the chaos. It's direct. It's visceral. That's why I picked 2012's Attack on Memory. They only have 8 songs, 1 instrumental, clocking in at 33 minutes. It made an impact on me. I just love what the singer does here and how he's going darker and heavier compared to the previous releases. So, Mark, that's why I wanted to see what you thought about this record.
Yeah, it's interesting that you started your review with, I guess Mark just doesn't get what I'm into because, man, I just really don't think Frank gets what I'm into right now.
See how that works?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty far off the mark. 2012's Attack on Memory by Cloud Nothing. What can I say, Frank? I hate it.
You hate it?
I hate it. We're going to really get into it.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready.
Really get into it. I had to really sit down and just wrestle with this thing, man. You really sold me on something last week that I was really into. You said Thin Lizzy and Black Sabbath, and then a bunch of stuff I hadn't heard of. I looked a little bit of it up. Nothing kind of did anything for me. It was just kind of like okay, I just don't get this yet. But I knew those two, and I said, okay, well, maybe there's something in there. And I tried not to hold on to that because, I think sometimes when people say they were inspired by something, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to show up. When you say Black Sabbath is in there, I'm not expecting, an Iron Man bass drum thump,
sure.
thump with a loud guitar over it, holding out big open notes. But I was interested to see maybe what would come of it. I didn't hear any of that.
Right.
Oh man, this thing.
Bring it on, man. Bring it on.
I listened to it the first time the whole way through.
Okay.
And I was going to call your wife and tell her to have you checked out. I just didn't get it. And you know what? That happens, right? I think you'll remember American Steel. You gave me, when American Steel reformed, Frank was like, dude, you got to check out this album. And he gave me the album they had just put out on Fat.
Was it Destroy Their Future?
It might be Destroy Their Future. And I just didn't get it. And then he gave me the first 2 albums.
Yeah.
And then I went back to it and I went, oh, okay, wait, no, I figured out what they're doing. I get it. It makes sense. Like my brain was able to figure out what was happening between the stereo and my ear, and it made more sense. So I took that logic and I applied it to this. I'm going to tell you I got an even bigger headache because on their website, they list their first album, their debut album as their self-titled album. And then they also mentioned an album that came out before it. So I don't know how you have a debut album that happens after something. You were the one very clear about third albums and busted my balls last week about Dillinger 4 having some EPs before the first actual record. Yeah. So these guys really just confused me out of the gate. Anyways, I found the first 2 records. I jumped in. The garage rock, lo-fi, indie, power pop sound thing was on full display. The vocals really blended into the guitar. It felt like I was in a garage underwater listening to faux pop songs that some kid just kind of half-ass wrote, which just really confused me more because they don't sound anything like Attack on Memory.
Right.
Which, I should have known because you told me, like, hey, this is a really different sound from where they started.
Yeah, they got way darker, I thought.
Well, darker, sure. That's a word. It's going to be easier to tell you why I think this album is garbage than try to salvage any hope that I might like it.
All right.
So the album opens with a rhythm being plunked out on a piano, no future, no past. And the band fills in quickly with a moody, dare I say, electric atmosphere. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Except it just drones on for the next 4 minutes. But before it drones on for 4 minutes, this crying, dare I say, whining just kind of comes through, and the voice is added with some effects, and there's a ethereal dreamlike march that just slowly builds very slowly. It's hard to tell on this track if Dylan Baldwin's even really singing or just whining. All the effects just stacked on top of each other.
So did the voice throw you off at first a little bit?
Oh yeah, you had the balls to complain about Eric from
Eric Funk. Yeah,
Eric Funk
Yes.
from Dillinger 4 having a
Totally.
whiny voice, and this dude's voice was literally, if I had just left a block of cheese out in the kitchen, it would have grated it for me. Even though the song builds to what sounds like a chorus, just another chorus happens at the end.
Mhm.
So it's like maybe just one chorus and then another chorus, which have no correlation to each other, just jammed together
Mhm.
into one song,
Yeah.
which sucked. So Wasted Days is the second track.
Yeah.
And this one tricked me. It opens with a riff that they clearly stole from the Foo Fighters.
Which song though?
I couldn't tell you something, when all the songs started sounding the same, somewhere around like White Light, White Heat. No, that's Social Distortion.
Yeah.
I got another confession.
Oh yeah. The song
it's-
with Best of You or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The
It's clearly one of those opening Foo Fighter riffs.
Got it. And thank you for the singing, by the way. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, you did it earlier. I figured I'd pay you back.
Absolutely.
I guess this is supposed to be the post-hardcore sound.
Mhm.
I'd say this is my second least favorite song on the album. It ends at 3 minutes, but for whatever reason goes on for another 5.5 minutes.
Right.
It bridges into just an ethereal droning march,
Mhm.
complete with buzzing saws, maybe a guitar being strummed into maybe a solo, maybe more buzzing. The bass guitar and a flatly tuned bass drum build this pace, more
Mhm.
buzzing, more guitar solo, but mostly just kind of noodling on a guitar. Then it gets kind of chaotic that we build, and now everybody's just kind of banging on stuff. And then it falls back to the flat bass and drums.
Mhm.
And then that goddamn voice comes back.
Yeah.
And while angsty, it doesn't appear to be more value to it than the simple lyrics let on. And we're going to really get into the lyrics later.
Yeah.
There was just nothing to this. Like there's, I'm not one who says that songs have to be verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, whatever.
Right.
You can structure them how you like. I just don't know that there was a structure, which would leave the argument, well, no structure is structure, but no, we're building a Lego bridge here. And you just left pieces out of the middle and you're calling it no structure, but clearly you tried to fake a structure with Lego pieces because it just hurts. That was a reference to stepping on Legos and why it hurts.
And it does extremely hurt. I've stepped on my fair shares. Which is interesting with that track, Wasted Days. I have to be honest with you. You said it's one of your least favorite. That's probably my most favorite on there.
Okay, fair enough. Let's keep marching because, like I said,
keep marching. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to throw you off. Go ahead.
I was happy it was only 8 tracks because otherwise we'd be here all day.
All day. 33 minutes, man. That's it. Go ahead.
I'm sure I can do longer on it. Fall In sees the band return to their lo-fi indie sound, but recorded better, or at least with less production to make it sound less bad on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I should state that I don't get lo-fi. I think it's just an excuse to not pay a lot for production, but that's neither here nor there.
Probably where it came from, but go ahead.
Right. It was nice to see some clear, strong structure in this song, a clear verse and chorus with some harmonizing. Although, again, this dude's sing-songy whining, could grate the finest of cheese. His singing makes me absolutely insane.
Oh.
Stay Useless.
Yeah.
I like this better as the title track of the record. Still not my favorite song. That's another lo-fi angsty track that is nothing if not blissfully short, at least for this record.
Right.
Separation. This is by far my favorite song on the album. Why is it my favorite song on the record?
It's the instrumental. It's
absolutely instrumental. I didn't have to hear this guy's voice. I hated it the least. It's the instrumental track, so no whining was a huge factor. The bass was finally in tune. It had a couple quirky parts. I definitely felt a little like Primacy going on in there when Primus was really in their groove.
Yeah.
Could have been shorter. But, beggars can't be choosers at this point, Frank. I was just happy we were near the end.
Got it.
So no sentiment. I'm going to get into some hyperbole on the singer here, and what I think he was actually doing in comparison to what he has said he has done. All of this is allegedly, so you can't sue me. I think this is where the record started off. I think this was the base idea for the album, right?
Right.
When we look at albums as complete pieces of art, there are those who will say, like, it's not necessarily the value of all its pieces added together, but I think, for a record, it kind of can be. And I think this was the moment where he decided that the band would be a little something different than it had been. The album itself would speak more differently. I think it probably should have been the opening track. You mentioned Dylan Baldy claims the name of the album, Attack on Memory, because of the new sound, and it was it's new members, and they wanted to move in a new direction from this point forward. It seems pretty clear when you listen to it that it's a starter kit, post-hardcore bass line and heavy drums, a little trilling guitar, and you throw some lyrics on it. It's as factory set hardcore as you can get. Obviously, I wasn't there writing process, and neither have I spoken to any members of the band, but it reads like reacting to people, reacting to the fact that they want to change.
There you go.
This song does that, but clearly the rest of the album relies on what the band had been known for to fill out the rest of the vinyl, as well as let's just jam for a while because we got to fill up the rest of this vinyl. So the next track is Our Plans.
Right.
This is probably the best Cloud Nothing sounds as a unit on the record. The band's indie part is at its best lyrically, and it's the best job being heavier in tone than the rest of the record. I really feel like this is probably the last thing they recorded, and they had finally gotten everything where they liked it, and rather than go back and do the rest of the record, they just finished. But again, I wasn't there. I don't know. How you doing, Frank? You still with me?
I'm with you, man. I'm actually my mouth is open, just waiting for you to close it out, because I do have some questions for you. But I'm here, man. I'm here.
Sure. Okay, so cut you. I want to say this appropriately. I fucking hate this song. The whining is over the top. The lyrics are disturbing at best.
Right.
This is the ex-boyfriend stalker anthem of an unachieving generation of loser fuckboys who need their mommies to hold their hands and tell them they're special.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, I really feel that way. Musically, nothing of interest happens in this song other than return to a basic verse-chorus structure that most of the album was lacking. And what a way to end the album, by exposing what a horrible person you are. Like I said, I don't know this guy. I don't know that he's actually a horrible person. I'm one for this is art, and just because I painted a picture of somebody being murdered doesn't mean I've murdered anyone. Just because I sing songs of death and destruction, woe is me, doesn't mean that you're a murderer or a killer or something.
Sure.
But when you sing and write lyrics directly instructing someone that you want to physically harm them, emotionally and physically, in what is clearly a relationship, I take issue with that. And I think he did that on this record. I just can't really be like disgusted by this song, honestly. Right. And I genuinely, and I mean this from a place of love, Frank.
Yeah.
I hope your daughters can never hear this song, because it really brought me to that place where I was like, fuck this guy. If they come to town, I'll buy tickets just to turn my back at the stage.
Do you think that's taken it a little too personal, though? Because a lot of the times when people write these songs, I think it's stuff that never ever comes to like some realistic taking of action.
I'm happy you asked that, because I made sure to copy and paste the lyrics onto my notes so that we could discuss them. So the last two stanzas of the last song, which I will do the whole thing if you want me to, because it's gross, but I think this sums it up pretty well of how needy, how desperate, and how disgusting this person is.
Sure.
I need to know. I deserve to know. I need to know. I deserve to know. That's the entire stanza.
Right.
The second stanza is, I miss you because I like damage. I need something I can hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I miss you because I like damage. I need something I can hurt. Honestly, Frank, I've read better mumble rap lyrics. Juice WRLD could write this dude under the table from his grave. R.I.P. Juice WRLD.
There you go.
And in conclusion, I mean this sincerely.
Yeah.
Not only would I not buy this record, but fuck this band.
There you go. Okay. So first thing I have for you, my friend, is some text exchanges we had roughly about a year ago. Where we're talking about we're talking about I think this is the end of last year, and we're talking about bands, and I said you mentioned band to me. I said, I'll take a listen. I have it right here. It says, and I said, I really like the new Cloud Nothings, not this album, but the new one. You said, I'll check it out. And then your response is as follows. It's in my nature to assume heavier sounds aren't your cup of tea anymore. And I need to stop thinking that, because 20 seconds into that Cloud Nothings, I am super into it. That's a direct quote now, right? And we were talking and said, and I just wanted your reassurance. I said, and you like Cloud Nothings, right? And you said, yes. I was only able to listen to the last record, but I was into it. Could be I picked the wrong album for you?
Could be. Could be I had a chance to kind of passively listen to it and got into it without really kind of doing a little bit of a deep dive, which is what we're doing here, folks. We're really trying to get into these records and see what they are.
Dissect them out for sure.
You know, and I'm definitely one for guilty for kind of half listening to something, particularly if I'm driving. And just enjoying a rhythm, you know, I'm going to use the excuse of being a drummer, and saying as a drummer, I tend to just listen to rhythms, probably the first two passes through most records. You know, and that's certainly more of our casual listening spree. So I think in this particular case, because I did go back through the other albums afterwards, I don't know if it was the bad taste left in my mouth from this. You know,
I mean, that happens. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
that really just turned me off from anything they may have to do in the future.
Sure.
But not that the newer albums were bad. I had such a taste in my mouth that I wasn't ready to give them a real listen to after this, just because I couldn't find justification after that last song.
Now, I want to address that last song again real quick, but you said too, you also touched base on the first two records. Now, when you listened to those and then you heard Attack on Memory, were you like, oh, they should have stuck with what they had going on the first two records? Or you think, like, what was your thoughts there? Because I know you even went into and listened to those for a little bit.
Yeah, so I think when you Google search these guys, right, when we pull up the old Google machine, and we look into them, you hear this kind of story about how Baldy, whatever this guy's name is, was in school for recording and doing music and stuff like that, and then was coming home and doing some recordings and just throwing them up online, and somebody liked him, invited him to play a show, and the next thing you know, the band is born and they're off and doing their thing.
Right.
I think this is a situation where would I have preferred he stay in that original vein? I'd really have to start looking at those lyrics and see if the scumbaggery starts sooner.
Right.
But I think this is a case of somebody getting perhaps a little more recognition before they were musically ready to. And that development happened, the maturing happened at an off pace compared to somebody who's in college and just working through records with their friends. So I don't know that I wish the first two, that they had stayed the same style as the first two. I appreciate that lo-fi sound of kind of really feeling like you're back in a garage. But it doesn't do anything for me. I'm certainly not seeking it out. I tend to have a thing where when somebody's describing a band and there's like 4 descriptions and they're like lo-fi, power pop, garage, indie, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, which one is it? And I'm not saying
you just rather it be kind of like one thing, so you could. Is it almost like because it just then becomes all over the place? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I'm thinking if we can't like if you can't explain this to a third grader in a sentence or less,
right,
then it's not really, the idea is not really there, or the complexity of it. I think this is an example of a band that's trying too many things at once, and none of them are working.
mm-hmm.
Instead of finding that one thing that did work, like the sound of those first two records was cohesive,
right?
If nothing else. So would I have preferred they stay on that vein? Sure.
Right.
Do I mind when bands get darker? No. I think I've got a pretty interesting selection that had that if I learned anything, let's rephrase that. If I learned anything from this record, it's that quote that you read, which is that I need to stop assuming that you're just into singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
And acknowledge that you can and do embrace heavier sounds, a little more of that kind of math rock aesthetic where the tempos change quickly and erratically. I think this you will find when it comes as a marker, as you really explore this style of post-hardcore with that crazy melodic tuning. I think you're going to find that this as a benchmark is just going to fall way off your radar.
Interesting. I mean, again, very, very, I think, interesting takes. What's cool about these things is obviously we don't always have to see eye to eye, but it's going to give a different perspective, even going back and listening to it. Now, on the last song, I don't know. I think songs are left to people's interpretation.
I'll read the rest of those lyrics. It's pretty.
I have them up here. I have them up here because I wanted to go ahead and re-listen to them. But with what people say in songs, if I did that with everyone, I wouldn't be a fan of 75% of these people, to be honest with you.
And you're probably not wrong on that. Honestly, hey, look, and again, artistic interpretation, right? Poetic license, whatever you want to call it. You've got the right to try to push the envelope in any way you feel is appropriate.
Right.
But you have to accept that when you push the envelope in that nature, that people are going to stand up against it, and people are going to say, "Hey, that's morally or ethically wrong."
Sure.
You can wave that artistic flag and say, "Well, I get the freedom to do it anyways."
Sure.
And I get the freedom to turn my back at a concert and give you the finger the whole time.
Oh, without a doubt. Listen, you can listen to any of these songs and be like, I don't like, again, what they're saying. I mean, and most stuff, probably, even though we grew up on punk rock, you obviously have different views than I do. But if I'd listened to half these things, I probably wouldn't be into it, to be honest with you. And that's just the way it goes. But as you said, they're able to say these things. We're able to either choose if we like them or not like them, and that's what makes civil discourse entertaining, my friends. Right?
Certainly. My other problem with this record, and I promise I'll leave it alone at this, is
Go ahead.
there is no way you could fuck to this record.
It's not groovy enough for you?
No. It's, at the end of the day, when we look at the Henry Rollins scale of is this record good enough or not, do you want to break stuff to it or fuck to it? No. I just want to shut it off. So
you'll take the other option. There you go.
Right.
Well, Wasted Days is my jam at the gym as far as doing cardio goes. And, I actually think the way you put everything, it's great because who wants to always agree on stuff? That's my thing. And I think what's really cool is that we're able to break that down and really give each other an insight on what we think. And I loved it, man. So thank you.
I'm only going to agree with you because you like the record I picked. And you agreed with the way I felt about your record. No, hey, look, right. Frank makes a great point. A lot of this civil discourse that we have right now, we could really fix with just having these conversations.
Totally.
So, that's kind of the fun of this. That's kind of the
great.
joy of doing this.
Yeah.
I was
an absolute pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I was thinking for next week?
What's that, my friend?
We've been kicking around the idea of doing this podcast for a while, probably as long as that email thread you had to go through.
Yeah, it was a text message, but go ahead.
The text thread. I can't keep a single phone that long. I'm sorry, folks. But why don't we do records that we've been kind of hanging on to since this came up as an idea? I know we both have some pretty thick catalogs of we want each other to listen to. And I think maybe this week was a great barometer for where to go next.
Sure. Okay. So you want me to go or you go first? Doesn't matter to me, my friend.
I just yammered for a while. Why don't you talk?
All right. So I was thinking about this, and obviously a lot of these are going to, I'm always going to be thinking, well, what would Mark think about this? But we spoke about them, and I mentioned them in episode 1. So earlier offline, we spoke about grunge. I mentioned Sub Pop records. Sub Pop had Nirvana, Soundgarden, Mudhoney. They also signed the Afghan Wigs from Cincinnati, which didn't fit the grunge bill, but to me, they put out some great records. Lead singer Greg Dooley is so flawed vocally in so many ways, but to me, it works. They combine grooves and almost with their own version of rock and elements of classic soul in a noir feeling. They were bad boys. They probably still are, but they made one of my favorites, the album Black Love. It was initially considered inferior to the previous hit, Gentleman, but as years have passed, it's become one of those cult favorites. So I bring to you, my friend, from the Afghan Wigs, the album Black Love. What's your pick for me, my friend?
Well, I'm really excited because every kid who thinks they're cooler than me thinks I should be listening to Afghan Wigs.
Nice.
So it's about time that I just finally cave and listen to it. I had a few records in mind for choosing for you. I really wanted to take it in a direction a little different than what we had done before. So I chose something a little moodier, and I came up with the Casket Lottery 2002. They released Survival is for Cowards, a record full of angst and atmosphere. This record lands somewhere between post-hardcore and emo. If you're trying to stick, that kind of label on it, I feel like it's going to land somewhere in there. And you know me, I absolutely hate the phrase emo.
Sure, me too. I'm not a fan of it.
But I think what we're getting here is we're going to have a kind of post-hardcore aesthetic to it with deep emotional lyrics. I really think you'll dig the lyrical vulnerability of this and embrace the depth of the guitar work that's really going on here.
Okay, cool, man. I am amped for it. I have to be honest with you. I don't know anything about them, just other than if I were to look up that band, Small Brown Bike, they're another band who's been compared similarly to them. That is it. So this is really a clean slate that I'll have listening to this record.
Very cool.
So I'm very excited. And yeah, that's all I have. Do you have anything else to add, my friend?
Just feel free to rate and review wherever you find this podcast. That feels weird to say. Remember, the best way to get in contact with us is through Instagram at Check Out This Record. We're going to put pictures up of the albums as we announce them so that you know that they're coming.
Yep.
I'm going to be playing with this, so that means lots of dumb musical-related memes in our story timeline. And shoot us a recommendation. If there's something you think we should hear, if you're curious of our opinion on a record, I think Frank and I plan to make some time to interject on those records, whether we both do a little recap of them or just one or the other tackles them. We got to cover that, but we need you to make some recommendations before we can do that. So feel free to find us on Instagram, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next episode.
Bye-bye.